Hi and welcome back to the first upgrade in the Remington 223 series. Now, the first thing I'm going to upgrade in this rifle is the trigger, solely because it's reading between 5 and 7 pounds. Last night I got 7.1 pounds, quite a lot. It's inconsistent and it's very heavy. Now everything I'm going to show you in this video can be done on the X-Mark Pro, which is this guy here that has a little screw in the blade. I think the X-Mark doesn't have the Pro, but I'm pretty sure the series are in the same places. And this version I have here, which is a pre-X-Mark Pro. Now, if you don't feel comfortable doing this yourself, don't. But I'd rather people get a rough understanding of how it works rather than try it, do it wrong and cause failure. If you do it correctly and test it afterwards for safety, you're not going to really have an issue. You can get the Remy triggers down to the range of 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds safely. Some of them won't go that low. It depends. Over time, their sears will smooth out due to use. They might go down eventually, but this particular trigger in here is the Remington trigger I actually like the most. So let me just get this out of the way. So here it is. I'm going to do close-ups in a minute when I'm doing all the work, but this guy here is a pre-X-Mark trigger. This is your X-Mark, both Remy triggers. These are, I think, the version just before the X-Mark because it has a sear engage safety and not a blade engage safety. So when you put on the safety, it actually lifts the sear away from the disconnect surface and makes it safe. We put it back on, it puts them back together so that they're ready to disconnect and fire. So they're very similar, and actually the adjustment points are almost in the same places on the X-Mark and this. So I'm going to show you on this one because this guy here has already been adjusted. You're going to need something to melt glue if it is very stuck on there, especially with the X-Marks. The glue from the factory needs to be melted out with a little torch, something like that. It'll take a second, a little bit of pressure with an Allen key. The X-Marks are all Allens. These are flathead screwdriver. And the most important thing is if you're going to work on something like a trigger or any gun that has flatheads or straight cut screws, you need to get a gunsmith set of drivers because they have straight wall bits. So the blade itself comes down in a straight line and cuts off, where a normal screwdriver could come down and come in at an angle. So the walls aren't straight down, and it'll cause a lot of damage in rounding and stripping to smaller screws that are under tension, which a lot of these are. So I'm going to leave it in the gun to do this work, and I'll switch around to a small camera, show you the current weight of pull, and talk you through getting this guy down to hopefully 2.5 pounds from its current probably 6-ish pounds. Okay, I know it's a weird angle, but I need to show you what I'm doing with my hands. But the first thing, before I show you the triggers and what all the different screws do on them, I want to show you the difference between a standard Remy and an aftermarket trigger like the DC or hybrid trigger. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to weigh the pressure, or give a quick pressure scale to how heavy the Remington trigger is. Now both of these actions are clear. There's nothing in them. We have to leave a bolt in them to test the trigger. So we're going to lock the bolt in. It's ready to fire. Okay, so here we have, as you can see, the Remy. We're just going to weigh the trigger. So at a 5.5 or so. Let's go again. So we're weighing right to the middle of the blade where you'd pull. I'm pulling straight back on it. 5.4. So it seems it might be around the 5.4 area on this trigger at the moment. And I'm just going to weigh for the third time. Yeah, 5.4 is where it clicked off. Alright, so we're looking at 5.4 trigger. And this is the bit people don't like to see. A slam fire is when you slam down the bolt and it fires the firing pin, releases the firing pin, acts on the trigger mechanism. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slam it with the plastic side of this hammer. You'll see that's safe. Now I wouldn't expect anything but that from a Remington trigger or a Remington factory setup because it's designed to be safe. That's the whole idea. So here we are, DCR hybrid trigger. You see DCR embedded on the side there. It's all machine cut aluminium, steel, or aluminium, steel, and stainless steel. Very, very nice. We're going to weigh it. So we're cocked. You can see the hammer's back there. Action's clear. And we're getting, line it up here again, 0.5, 0.4, and 0.5. Okay. Now it is easy to put just about any action down to that weight, but it's not easy to do it safely. So you'd imagine a 0.4 or 0.5 or 0.6 of a pound trigger would fire. Oops, hit the camera. But it's completely safe. Safety's off, as you can see. And boom. Completely safe. No slam fires, can't get it to fire by hitting the action. As safe as it could be. So that's the big difference between a low trigger pull and a safe trigger pull. Is if you hit it with a hammer and it goes off, it's not safe. You shouldn't be taking that out into the field. It's something that's unknown. It's not gonna work. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the Remy trigger to a point where it'll be as low as we can get it safely. Okay, so what we have here is our trigger. Let me zoom out a tiny bit. This is our pre-X Mark trigger. This is an X Mark trigger, X Mark Pro. As far as I know, the only difference is the X Mark doesn't have this tension screw, which is completely pointless. The X Mark Pro does, and you can take a couple of pounds off sometimes by loosening this, sometimes you can't. So everything here is pretty much identical. I'm just going to point out what each of these screws do. So here on the back, and on the back of this guy here, and this one it's an Allen key and this one it's a flathead, is your sear engagement. Now what that does is, if I can get the light in there, zoom, there we go. It's how much of this surface, these two surfaces touch together when the bolt is ready to fire. So, kind of hard to do it now. So there we go. You can see the two surfaces touching. Adjusting the back screw, which is behind A here, will change how much of that there is before the trigger movement disconnects and lets the bolt fall. Okay? We're not going to touch that on this trigger here. You're better off, if you can, to have as much of the surface contact as possible, because that's the safest way to stop an accidental or fire. Just leaving as much contact as possible. No bang, no jump will cause it to disconnect. So we're going to leave that the way it is. We're not going to touch the back screw. On the front, you can see on this camera here, we have two screws, and this guy, let me put it up a bit, there we go. This guy here, the one closest to the action, which is also the same on this one, although it's an Allen key. There we go. It's an Allen key here, and it's this one here, is your trigger over travel. And that's after the bolt is fired, how far forward the trigger will travel before it comes to a hard stop against the surface. Then below it, you have your important one here. This one here is the pressure it takes to pull your trigger. And that's the guy we're going to be looking at today. So what you'll need to do is, a lot of the time when you get these, they're covered in glue. If the glue won't just chip off and it won't turn by itself, you're going to have to get a little blowtorch or something like that Now a tiny one, I'm talking maybe even a high pressure gas fire lighter, something like that, just to melt the glue from the front. Now this still has its factory glue on it, so you can see it here. All this glue stops you from moving this. So we're going to have to melt this out, and that will then turn. That'll get you to a place where you can start changing the pull weight on your trigger. So what we're going to do is, we know that this thing here at the moment is set to like 5.5 pounds. What we're going to do, I'll zoom out here, I'm going to drop the bolt. I'm going to set my overtravel. So when I drop the bolt, you should see the sear contacts here. Let me get this to focus. There we go. Sear contacts will come together. See them touch in there. And it's locked. You can still see the sears. When I pull the trigger, they disconnect, bolt fires. At the moment, this pulls miles past it. You can see how far past it goes. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a flathead screwdriver in this case. If the other trigger, you use an Allen key. And we're going to tighten the screw that's closest to the action. So it's this guy here. And what it'll do is it'll close that gap. You can see it closing. You can see open, closed. And I don't like too much over travel. So I'm just going to get it to a place where it's comfy. There. So now, you see the bolt still works perfectly. It didn't change the pressure, but the over travel is gone. Once that has gone click, it doesn't travel past there. You can set that to whatever you want yourself. That's a personal preference. I don't like much past the disconnect. So that's it. That's that part done. Next part is the trigger pressure. Now on these particular ones, there was not a fault, but something that could happen. I don't know if it happens on the X marks, and I doubt it. I think they fixed it. When you are loosening this screw, you might find that the trigger pressure does not change. What's happened in that case is the screw has been tightened so much in the factory. You can actually take it out so you can see it. It's been tightened so much in that the little spring, and it's a tiny spring, I'm not sure will it come out here or not. No. You can see this guy here. There's a little spring that sits on this. I'm not going to take it out now because I'm likely going to drop it. Sometimes it can go in past the screw and it'll bump and get caught on the shoulder of the front of the action wall, and it'll use that as its spring point, which means that when no matter how much you loosen, it's not going to let any tension off that spring. And if that's the case, you just got to take out the screw, get a little small drill bit. You'll see the screw in there. Just touch it and you'll feel it click. As long as it doesn't fly across the room, you should be okay. So now, there's no pressure on this at the moment, which means the bolt won't lock. I cannot get a bolt lock. Okay, it's not firing. So what we're going to do, you can see it's all loose. Keep bringing this in. You'll see the wobble starting to go. There you go. So I'm going to bring it in, just so there's no more wobble in it. There we go. Now, this is definitely lower than it was before, but it probably isn't safe yet. Yeah, that's super light at the moment. And that's not safe. And I'll show you by giving it the old bang with the hammer. So bring it out a bit. Load it up. You can see it's cocked and ready to go. And of course I set it to exactly where it needs to be. Alright, you can get lucky like me. That's pretty much where it needs to be, but for argument's sake, I'm actually going to bring it to an unsafe condition. So I'm going to bring it back out. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. I'm going to bring it back out again. We're getting bolt lock. We're going to see, it's gone. Fired by itself. You don't ever want to be facing that condition. And hitting it with a plastic hammer isn't going to mark anything. I've hit it with the wrong side of the hammer. See? It's gone. That's an unsafe condition. You don't want that. You want it to be just where you cannot set it off with a hammer. It's what I do. It's crude, but it works. Alright, so we're going to bring the tension. Angle this right again for you. There you go. Tension it back up. A bit more. A bit less. I'm going to try there. Okay, so we're going to lock it up. No, it's gone off. It's got to go a little bit tighter. That's just marks. Got to come in a little bit more. So, quarter turns is enough until you get it. Then you can go a little bit tighter. Nope. We got a disconnect. That's no good. A little bit tighter. Quarter turn. Alright, we have a lock. And obviously the safety works. What we're going to do now is we're just going to weigh it, see what the trigger pull is set to, and if we're good with that, we'll lock it up. Okay, so sitting there. That looks a little bit over 3, which is half what it was, might add. Maybe a 2.8. Yeah, it looks about 2.8. I'm actually going to come back another couple of degrees. We're going to lock it up, I think. So back in 0. Yeah, 2.8. I'm going to come back a fraction and try it again. So this is where you do your tuning to get it exactly where you want. So, it's like before. This is the screw that's the farthest from the action. Going to come out. Just a fraction, that's all we needed. And I'm going to weigh it again. And then give it a quick bump test. And we should be good to go. It'll be a nice, usable trigger. It looks to be 2.7. 2.5, that's where I want it. Let's give it one more. Oop. 2.5 at disconnect. Okay, so that's where I wanted it. 2.5. Lucky enough to get it. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of a tap. See if I can get it to slam fire. If I can, I'm going to put a bit more on. If I can't, it's going to stay where it is. No, that's pretty good to me. Yeah, even banging the bolt went into it. But when you touch the trigger, it's good to go. So that right there is a 5-pound trigger to a 2.5-pound trigger, leaving plenty of sear engagement, removing the overtravel, and setting it to a very, very usable weight. And you might be able to see here, if I bring this nice and close, the amount of sear engagement we have, which is really what makes it safe. There. Before I disconnect, there is a bunch. You can see it there, touching. There we go. There's a good millimeter, maybe a bit more of overtravel, off the sear engagement. And that's what gives you the safety. The bump isn't big enough to overcome the pressure of the spring or the amount of surface that's engaged. When you pull, it fires. And basically, that's it. That is how you adjust your trigger. Alright, So that is how I adjust the trigger. It's not the only way to adjust the trigger, but I've never had a slam fire, I've never had a misfire, I've never had anything that I would consider not safe. And I think that's the most important part about adjusting a trigger is don't bring it into an unsafe condition. Anybody can do that. But to do it properly takes time, and you're probably not going to get it the first time, but you will get it. So now that we have this guy at a really nice 2.5 pounds, we're going to lock it in there. And to do that, we need degreaser. So what you do is a little bit of lighter fluid, something like that, even a little dab of petrol, and just degrease this completely so there's no grease on it, and a little blob of super glue or some kind of glue that'll stop these 2 screws from backing out. Now if you wish, at the very start you can take out the screws a little bit halfway and add a little bit of blue Loctite. It'll make it even better, but just capping them with glue afterwards is totally fine because they both have pressure on them and they're not going to go anywhere. Because they're not the hardest things to move afterwards, so you don't want it creeping either way. Now it is the exact same procedure with one of these guys. The back one is your sear engagement, the front one here is your overtravel, and the one that's slightly far away from the action is your spring pressure. Now on these guys as well, you've got an extra spring up here in the blade, but I've never found that they do much. And in fact, I don't really like these because a lot of these triggers have a weak point, which is the hole that they've drilled in the trigger blade, and if you put a lot of excess pressure on it, it can crack. But yeah, a little bit of effort, a little bit of knowledge, you can adjust your trigger down. But as I said, if you don't feel like you can do it yourself, or you don't want to take a chance, a smith will do it, or spend not a lot of money and get an aftermarket trigger. Timneys are fantastic. The 510 is time proven. You can go with a top end like a Joule or a DCR like I have there. There's a million different ones. You can get ones that have different sear surfaces, ones that have run-on ball bearings. It's endless, the types of ones you can get out there. But as long as it's safe, it's a good trigger. So that's pretty much it for the trigger upgrade. I'm ready to go out and maybe have a go at some rabbits and foxes with this guy. Maybe get some targets done. But the next thing we're going to do is rebed this Bell & Carlson. So I'm not really sure can you see it, but by eye you can actually tell that this whole bedding block is skewed about 3-4 degrees left, which is throwing off the center of the barrel in the channel and causing funny drift when it's under any kind of pressure. So this guy will be next week's project. Once that's done, it's going to be very nice actually. I'm looking forward to turning some proper groups of this, but I know the newer trigger will bring down those group sizes a good bit, because the less you have to force on that trigger, the less energy that's forced into your bipod, the next less energy that's floating around, easier it is. A lot of people would say that you don't need a better trigger, you just need better technique, but there is a line, and a 7-pound trigger, you can only do so much with those. They're designed for safety, they're not designed for accuracy. You can hunt with them, fantastic, but if you want to do any small type of work, you're shooting small circles, you're shooting whatever long distances, you want something that's going to break reliably and is not going to require you to use too much muscle power to pull on that trigger. I know on the last video, when I was pulling the trigger, I never wrapped my thumb, but on this gun from factory, I had to wrap my thumb around the back, because otherwise I would not be able to pull the trigger. I had to use it to force my finger in. I couldn't just float it and pull like I normally do and what I'm used to. So I'm interested to see what kind of groups we're going to get with this when I get out again, and for sure I'm going to put them up on Facebook, and I'm going to put them up in the next video as well. So if you found this interesting, or you liked what you did, or you're going to try it yourself, ask me any questions below you want, and I will try and answer them. As I said, it's not a hard thing. Take it easy, and kind of understand what you're doing as you're going along. And if you have any questions, you can ask me on here, or if you're on Facebook, I get notifications to my phone. I'll answer pretty much straight away. So thanks very much for watching. In the next episode, we'll be tackling the bedding job, and stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time.